celebrating the Governor's Mansion's 50th anniversary in the next couple of weeks with all sorts of wonderful events. We're going to be talking about the history of the mansion, the place where it used to be, where it is now, how it has changed, how it has responded to its environment, and probably as importantly, how the landscape itself has changed over time as well. Unlike a building where we do renovation, we do restoration, we have interiors, exteriors, we change for fire codes and access and all sorts of things like that, a landscape has a lifespan. And in this particular instance, the Governor's Mansion landscape has responded to the Capitol, of course. It's responded to major significant events in history, such as the Oklahoma City bombing, which resulted in the fence, and things like 9/11, where even though that really didn't have much to do with the mansion itself, the current landscape that you see right now was actually installed during that period of time.
A Governor's Mansion is not just a residence. It's an office building, it's a public meeting hall. It's a hard job for a building. Nebraska didn't have a Governor's Mansion originally. From the time of statehood in 1867 until about 1900, each governor would stay at a Lincoln Hotel or buy a house or build a house. So there wasn't a single Governor's Mansion. Until about 1900, a mansion had been built about 1891 or 2, just south of the Capitol at 15th and H Streets by D.L. and Jeanette Thompson, wealthy family in town. Big, beautiful building, porches wrapping all the way around it, and even a second-story porch around it. When they went off to international diplomatic service, they sold the mansion, their house, to the state of Nebraska. And that was the Governor's Mansion from about 1900 until mid-1950s. And a Lincoln architect, Selmer Solheim, was hired. He'd done a lot of houses. He hadn't done a Governor's Mansion that I know of. And it is a rather different kind of building. And he produced the Georgian colonial red brick mansion-looking mansion that we all know as Governor's Mansion. In the earliest views of it, and because we're beside the Capitol, and you could take a camera up and didn't even have to rent an airplane to do an aerial view, we see the mansion in the very first views as a red brick house in the middle of a green lawn. Not much else in the landscape. We'd estimate that the pin oak trees on the H Street face of it probably were put in right about the time of the mansion. They look to be about half a century old. Probably fortunate for the mansion, all the events of the second half of the 20th century and the early 21st pushed it towards a different kind of landscape, a more house-like landscape, a more homey. Also, as we grew to understand why you might not plant pin oaks in Lincoln, choices were made for more Nebraska materials and hardy materials. I think the best thing that happened to the mansion, sad in one way, of needing a fence to protect a public building, which was recognized after Oklahoma City, but it puts it in a context that makes it look more like a house. The iron and brick fence really kind of set it up then like a grand house in the middle of a mansion block, and I think it doesn't any longer have to compete with the world-class state capitol across the street. In its current landscape, which I think succeeds so much better than anything we've had at the mansion before, aspects I like are introducing native materials, but in the front, it's a very formal building. It needs to be. It needs to connect to the Capitol. So it's got its circular drive, but then placed with it some of our prairie materials, but organized in a way to really respond and light up the building, give it some shape and some color. That green and red, we love red in Nebraska, but that's not enough in a landscape. And then the backyard, and that's kind of the special space, somewhat more the mansion's own residential space, but also a place for events. Ordinarily, when we lay out, I don't lay out, but when landscape architects lay out a backyard, they don't have to leave a place for a major celebration tent. In this backyard, you do. So all of this has to work together of what kind of building it is, how it'll be used, and then now the landscape, I think, recognizes that and makes the outdoor space also serve the uses of this special building on the inside.
As Ed mentioned, the governor's residence is really a lot more than just a residence. It has to accommodate gatherings of a small group of people all the way up to 400 or 500 people for a major event. It has to have spaces that people really enjoy. And a part of that is also how you restore the landscape. Many of you probably have properties where the landscape has gotten old, tired, you've lost plant material. It sort of needs that renovation or that restoration. And a thing to remember is that a landscape is a living thing. The best thing you can ever do for a landscape is pay attention to it and make some changes, maybe not on a yearly basis, but certainly every 3 or 4 or 5 years. In this particular instance, the landscape responded to major events, but it also responded to a difference in style. The residence was designed with a lot of Nebraska-style plant material, lower input, multi-season interest for 365 days of the year because the residence is open to the public. And a part of what we are also doing in this restoration landscape effort is planting a tree for the 50th birthday celebration in honor of Retree Nebraska, which is a new planting effort that we are kicking off in the state.